This is Dr. Stephanie Wautier, and I am the host of Conversations with a Chiropractor. If you have been following along, then you know this is not a health how-to. This is not instructions on how to care for your spine. Conversations with a Chiropractor is a fireside chat, a little bit like Tuesdays with Maury, a little bit like chicken soup for your soul. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to this inspirational conversation. In this episode of Conversations with a Chiropractor, I sit down with one of my friends who works in a university setting dealing with students. And then we go down the rabbit hole of motherhood. It was a lovely, lovely conversation. I hope you'll enjoy. Kat, thank you so much for being on Conversations with a Chiropractor.
Really welcome.
So happy to have you here.
Thanks.
So, your current position at Northern Michigan University is that you're the Director of Housing.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit just recently about mentoring and education and sort of like the checklist of education. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So in housing, one of my main priorities is to support a team and support our students in building community and having different opportunities to experience their personal growth. We all know that there's academic growth that happens in higher ed, but we're really after the personal growth. It's no surprise that during this time of their lives, this is a time when they're growing in their personal development at really high rates. One of the things that I really enjoy working with students on is helping them to be their authentic self, not just the student, my staff even, and myself. We've all been in jobs where we've been asked to do something that is not who we are, or to do it in a way that does not come natural to us. It's like sticking a square peg in a round hole. It's just not going to happen. All that energy and frustration and dissatisfaction, that just leads to poor performance and having expectations not met. And so I really try to create an environment where my staff can be who they're created to be, and then to help students as well, try to figure that out and navigate that. It doesn't mean that they can't do everything that they want. It's just that they may approach a task very differently than what I would. And rightfully so. We're all different and we all bring different strengths to the table.
And I love that you create this community of acceptance and love, and I've seen it in action. Tell me a little bit about how people, as they are growing up, whether they're in high school or college, how do they know themselves? I know we talked a little bit about Clifton strengths.
Mm-hmm.
You are an expert in that. And would you say that doing a personality test or doing like a Clifton strengths test or something like that is beneficial for adolescents?
So, first of all, I'm not an expert. I just want to make that very clear. I'm a coach, and so I can help people figure that out and help them be able to take the strengths that they have and kind of harness them and use them. But looking at your question, I think the way that students and all of us actually can figure out what our strengths are is, yes, I feel that Clifton Strengths has been a huge tool in my life to get to know who I am and to make sense out of why I do what I do, and to also be okay with things and not look at that as a deficit, but look at it as a real strength. I also think that self-reflection is incredibly important. I don't feel like we slow down enough in life to really self-reflect. And so whether that's journaling or talking to a coach or just talking to your friends, sitting and staring out a window, going for a walk in the woods, something to reflect on who you are, how you felt, and maybe why you did what you did and what would you do differently. I think that is huge. I wish that we would teach that in younger grades so that kids could figure that out and look back instead of always being forced to look forward. I was just talking to a friend recently about goals. There are definitely people in the world who are very goal-oriented. I was listening to a podcast recently with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was talking about how he was never satisfied. He always knew what the next thing was, and when he'd reach it, It wasn't like, okay, yay, I did it, but it was what's next.
Mm-hmm.
I am not that person. Thank God we have people like that. I mean, those are the folks that really do some major changes and make huge footprints in our world, but that isn't me.
Well, and I think it's amazing that it isn't you, because I unfortunately have that tendency, or did have that tendency.
Yeah.
I think this is what education pushes us to.
Yeah.
We are pushed to, what are you going to take for your class? When are you going to take the ACT? What college are you going to go to? What degree are you going to get?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is this phenomenon that a lot of kids graduate from college. Maybe they find a job, maybe they don't, but there's this huge emotional letdown. Like, what now? That thought, like, what was this all worth? And I think that's horrible. It's a detriment to us societally, culturally. I think we don't take enough time off. I think we do. And I'm saying we and me, like me. I.
And myself as well.
I mean, we're on this hamster wheel. We're pushed. And culturally, it is not acceptable to take time off. It's not acceptable to relax. Like, those Arnold Schwarzenegger type folks are in the press. They are the ones that are getting accolades from society, not the people who are walking in the woods, reflecting, like meditating, like that. And hopefully there is going to be a shift and a change. The daydreamers, right? Like there's another thing that sort of I learned from this podcast called working geniuses. There's like 6 working geniuses. We can't have all doers. We need daydreamers. We need people who are more in the process mode. Like every work culture or university culture or department, we need people that are different from each other. We can't have those quote unquote type A, success driven, like doer achievers. We actually need daydreamers. We actually need people who will encourage us to sit and stop and focus or laugh. And sometimes those character types or those personality types, they are not applauded for who they are.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a really big thing.
I mean, how many times have I'll speak for myself. I can't tell you the number of times I've asked young people in high school, so are you thinking about going to college, and what do you want to study? And I know that the majority of students who come to college, they're going to change their major. Like most of us know this, but yet we keep asking that. And I don't know why we do that. I do the same thing in life with just achieving, whether it's money, things. And I think that it kind of reminds me of that story in the Bible where there was a man who had a barn. And he filled that barn with all kinds of things. And once he got it filled, he was like, I got to build a bigger barn. And really challenged on that as far as like, when will that barn be enough? And that's easy to look at material things, but it's the same for like, how many partners do we need to have? How many friends do we really have to have in order for it to be enough? Some people always have that itch. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or not. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we need those folks. I tend to be someone who likes to just sit in the moment and let the pond calm. At the same time, though, you can get stuck in that just sitting there, enjoying the moment and not moving forward. So how do you balance all that with students of trying to get them to move forward while looking behind them and accepting who they are at the present moment? It is quite the dance. It's just so much fun to be able to work with them day in and day out and to figure out that dance and figure out where they're at today. It can be painful to watch that growth. It's hard for them. It's hard to sit back and be a part of that, maybe be a part of their mistakes, or just have to sit and cheer them on when maybe they're not making the best choices. So it's a mixed bag, but definitely for me in my position, it's a complete gift to be a part of many people's lives. There are students, but then I work with a lot of young adults this is their first full-time job. So how cool is that to give them a good experience of the workforce? And of how it can be, what an employer can be like.
Yeah.
So yeah, good.
Well, you're a gift to them because many folks have horrible jobs, horrible first jobs,
Yeah.
or as young adults, they've sort of been told that, like, unless they are like this, unless they fit this mold, then they're nothing, or they're not worthy, or they're not enough.
Being not enough. Oh, that's a hard, I mean, to switch a little bit. It reminds me of like being a mom, never feeling enough.
Like, you as a mother are
Yeah.
never enough. You've
Yeah.
never, like, you can't do enough. You can't be enough.
Yeah, or even like
Yeah.
a wife and a mom and have a job. One, I don't think that women can have everything. Like, we were brought up to believe, for those of us who are a little bit older, we were taught that, like, you can have everything. Well, no, you can't. You can't do everything. Something's gonna give. And I do feel that way quite frequently, of just, it's never enough.
Mm.
And I think because I am someone who likes to sit and be happy, that's frustrating because I don't want to keep chasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yet there's that part of me that still feels like I'm not enough and like I need to be chasing something.
Did you get to stay home with Jonah when he was little, when he was born?
No, in fact, I had a C-section with him, and then I was supposed to be out, I think it was like 6 weeks, and at 4 weeks, I couldn't stop crying. I clearly had postpartum depression. I wanted to go back to work. I went to the doctor because I knew that, like, this is not normal to be crying all the time. And the nurse practitioner had said, "You're running away. You shouldn't go back to work. You're running away. You need to be there for your child," and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I have this postpartum depression, and they agreed to give me something for it, but only if I went to counseling. And I said, okay, yeah, that's fine. So I went.
That's actually pretty profound and amazing.
Yeah.
That there was even that conversation at the quote unquote doctor's office.
Yeah, really.
I mean,
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, like, oh, okay, we'll give you, I can't remember what they gave, Prozac, I think. Like, we'll give you Prozac, but you have to go see someone as well. I got the prescription. I went and saw someone, and I was like hysterically crying through the whole thing. And about 5 minutes in, she said to me, well, what is it that you want? And I said, I just want to go back to work. And she was like, well, then go back to work. And it was like, all of a sudden the clouds parted and the sun came out. I was like, oh, really? And she told me some moms can be better moms by going back to work. And so that moment on, I was fine. I stopped crying. I never filled the prescription. That's what I needed to do.
So I will say that you and I had very different experiences, and I definitely had postpartum depression as well. But all I wanted to do was be the only one who was taking care of my child. Like, I wanted to control every circumstance. In fact, like for Noah, it was completely undiagnosed. I was probably postpartum anxious. I was always nervous that he was going to get physically colds, like catch a cold, because we lived in this old house on East Michigan Street, and we literally, the windows would rattle, and I was like, he's going to get cold, he's going to catch a cold. I would give him a bath in front of the fireplace, like in one of those little bathtubs.
Yeah.
Because I was like,
So scared.
like so nervous, so anxious. But I didn't want to ever leave him because I felt like I was the only human who could take care of him. So going back to work for me was like heart-wrenching and horrible.
Sure.
And like the worst thing that could ever happen to me as a mother and as a human. Sort of the same with Sonia, although I kind of knew at that point I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to stay home. I got pregnant. I was an employee. I didn't own my business yet. And I said to my husband, could I please stay home with the kids? Like, just for a little while. Just for a little while. And he was like, you took out $1 jillion of student loan. Like, you have to work.
I gotta pay the piper, huh? Yeah.
So it's very interesting, although we share the grief in motherhood of like never feeling enough, never feeling good enough, never feeling like we've done enough. For me, such a gaping part of that grief is because I felt like I abandoned them in a way. Like I felt like I wasn't the mother that stayed home and took care of them. Like I still have a lot of grief over being a working mom. So tell me a little bit more about your feeling and desire to go back to work and like what those first 4 weeks were like as a mom, like when Jonah was born.
So C-section, I don't think I ever really connected right away with Jonah. And I wanted a child so badly. We went through some infertility and then had to go through some drugs and whatnot in order to have him. We were really lucky that we were able to have a child. But then to know all of that, to know how every month I would cry and I'd feel like it was a death because I wasn't pregnant and I felt like I was a failure. Now to have what I wanted, like what my heart's desire was in my arms and not feel a connection, that was so strange.
And probably something you couldn't talk about to anyone, right?
No.
Like, how could you admit that you weren't content and elated because you just got everything you wanted, right? All of your struggles of fertility, and you have this perfect, beautiful baby boy, and why aren't you happy? Like, that's society's question to a mother.
Yeah.
You worked all this time, you had fertility issues, you got pregnant. Now, why aren't you happy? Be happy.
Yeah.
Like, be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Not only do you feel horrible because you've just admitted to yourself that you don't feel a connection or you know that, but now you have the world kind of at your doorstep and judging you, and had to kind of deal with that on my own. I couldn't even say that to my husband because he was just head over heels and had great connection with Jonah and would have done anything to stay home. And so I felt, and that made me feel guilty. So I think, though, looking back on it, I think a big part is that when I had Jonah, I wasn't able to be awake. They had to put me under general. So when Jonah was born, because of some complications afterward, there was about a 2 to 3 hour stretch when Jonah was first born that I was sleeping. I don't remember any of it. And I have pictures of him showing my family. They weren't allowed to hold him because I had to hold him first, the nurse said, but they definitely saw him before me. I wonder if that had something to do with it. I woke up from general and the nurse is teaching Rob how to get Jonah to latch on.
It's like you were the last to join the party.
Yeah.
Like it was your birthday.
Yeah.
And like everybody was having the party without you.
And I mean, the result, I think, was this lack of connection. Very afraid. I wanted to do everything right. I had family saying, don't hold him too much, he's going to get used to it. But then you had other people saying, you can't hold him enough. And I couldn't even think about what I felt was the right thing to do because I was not in tune with that at that point. So I just didn't know what to do. I felt like it was a task.
Like so many people were giving you their opinion.
Yeah.
Like, do this, cat, do this, don't do this, don't do this.
And unsure that I was asking for it. I'm a collector, so I like to collect a lot of information and make a decision. But when you're exhausted and when you're recovering from surgery, you don't have the time or the withal of your mind to even make a lot of those decisions. So when I went back to work, things started to change. And my mother-in-law, well, let me back up a little bit. So I had asked my mom to come up at one point because I was crying all the time. And this is before I went back to work. And my mom said, being from that generation of like, you just figure it out. My mom was like, no, you need to figure this out. And I don't think it would be good if I came.
Wow.
And my mom is like, my mom is one of the most caring, nurturing individuals, but like definitely that they didn't talk about postpartum. I don't think she was really in tune with that. She was in her 70s when Jonah was born.
What a hard thing to do as a mother. Wouldn't you want to scoop in and save you? And maybe that's my unfortunate deficit as a mother. I want to save, fix, etc. But like for her to say, Kat, I love you and I want you to figure this out on your own.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know if it was hard. It did feel like it was hard for her.
Really?
Yeah, it just kind of felt like.
And were you mad?
I was just I was kind of floored
Were you
and
mad at her?
embarrassed.
I mean, were you
No,
mad? No.
I wasn't mad. I was just embarrassed that I had to ask for that help. But then I asked Rob's mom, and there was not even a moment of hesitation. Here they are, 7 hours away, and she was just like, I'll be there tomorrow.
Wow.
And she taught me how to nurture him. She taught me how to calm him down and make him feel secure. I didn't know how to do that. For some people, it comes natural. It did not come natural to me. Now, once she taught me that, then I became like the mama bear of like, if he was crying, I had to have him. Like, I knew how to fix that. And I guess I'm a fixer. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Then things really changed for me. Then I was completely enamored with him. I don't even know if I've ever told her that, but she was the one that really had changed that for me. I also always felt like I wanted Jonah to know that he could be loved and cared for by many people, not just me. I know this is probably really dark, but I always felt like, what if something happened to me? I need him to know that he'll be okay. And if I'm not there, he'll be okay. And lots of people can love him.
That's amazing. Like, that's an amazing thing. And like a stark opposite of my like core feelings as like a new mom.
Sure.
It's amazing.
Well, yeah, I didn't feel like that was
me feeling like God was the only one fit to care for my child versus you saying, you know what? I'm going to show him that many people can love him.
But I think what you experienced and how you felt is very, like, that's what's celebrated. At least when we were having children, that mentality was celebrated. And I think even now, I mean, it's all about, you where are your children? You have them with you at all times.
But I was a bad mom because I went back to work. Like, I mean, like nobody knew my emotions or my struggles. Like, I needed to go to work and put on a happy face. And to me, that was really hard. I mean, I cried every day.
And you weren't a bad mom. You just had to do what you had to do.
Yeah, but we feel like we're bad moms. We judge ourselves. Nobody celebrated me. Like, nobody celebrated you. You know, I mean, this is too what I think is so wrong when we talk about like culture and mentorship. Like, you had a mother-in-law that stepped in and did a great thing for you. We should all sort of collectively look at new moms and be like, who's there for you? Who's taking care of you? Who's helping you?
Yeah, if you think about it, in the world's early days when women had babies, the whole community took, I can't remember, definitely took care of the mom and the baby.
Yes.
So that the mom could just connect.
Yeah.
And we just don't do that now.
We don't. And we don't take time. In fact, as a chiropractor, I do adjust a lot of babies and I take care of moms through pregnancy. And so many of them are like, when should I bring the baby in? What's the earliest? And I mean, I have adjusted my nephew at 1 hour old, and that's appropriate if they need an adjustment. But I tell these moms, you know what? You are going to be exhausted and stressed. And the last thing that you need is to bundle your baby up and get yourself out the door and come to an appointment. You're going to have your OBG follow-ups. You're going to have your pediatrician follow-ups. You just come to me when you feel ready. Because we push, go fast, heal fast, do it fast, get it done fast. And we don't culturally allow these moments and this time to just sit and be with our babies and be with our physical bodies that have really been like torn apart. I mean, can we just talk about what a C-section does? I mean, I had an emergency C-section with Noah. I was in labor for 4 days.
Oh.
I was preeclamptic. I was induced with first Cervidil and then Pitocin, and then my water broke. And then I pushed for 3 hours on like the 3rd day. And then by the 4th day, of course, this is like the night into the morning.
Sure.
They screwed the sensor into his skull to make sure that he was okay. And I was like, I am having a natural birth. I am having a natural birth. Like, Like,
Oh.
you are not doing a C-section. I was so against it. And then I'm pushing and pushing. He's not coming out. And he had a big head, and he was 9 pounds, 3 ounces. And so I had an emergency C-section, and I literally felt like a failure. Like all my hopes and dreams and power was taken away. And a similar experience, they did an epidural, so my legs were numb. So I was awake, actually puking the whole time, straps down, because they gave me Stadol, which made me horribly nauseous. So they wheel me to the basement. This is before the surgery floor was on the same floor as the OB.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wheeled down to the basement. I'm puking my guts out. I get cut open emergently. Noah is born, healthy, beautiful, wonderful. As I am recovering in the basement, they're sending me pictures of he and Gary, and they give him a bottle because his blood sugar was low, because they didn't let me eat for 4 days. So then he can't latch, and then my breast milk doesn't come in, and then I'm a failure again. And it's like this grief, this trauma, and now you're numb, right? I mean, they're cutting nerves.
And probably still are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Oh, I still have numbness.
Right?
I mean, when they cut, they've got to be cutting nerves.
They are cutting nerves.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we ever talk about this? Like, yes, it's horrible to have an episiotomy and have a vaginal delivery and be torn. Like, of course that's horrible.
Yeah.
It's also horrible to have that giant incision and have, like, numbness there, like, for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody talks about that.
I didn't have mine wasn't quite like that. It wasn't a C-section. It was a non-emergency C-section. I had been in labor for a while as well, but I didn't know that I was experiencing back labor. And they kept asking me, is this back labor? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I've never been in labor before.
Exactly.
But I do know that I felt like my back was going to literally bust open. That's how I felt with every contraction. And I'll never forget, I'm a larger woman. I'm 6 feet, not a small frame at all. And I hadn't really gained. I had lost weight, actually. So it was a good thing. I didn't need to put on. It actually was. Yeah, I mean, I had enough weight and I was eating well and my blood pressure was great. But I'll never forget, like, sitting there and I had Stadol in me and there was like a lake around me. Like, they don't tell you that, like, when your water breaks, that you just think there's this whoosh and that's it. Well, at least for me, it continued. And I had a lot of water because I'm a bigger person. So my poor husband's kneeling on towels and the little nurse is like, oh my gosh, okay. And then
amniotic fluid, not
not blood, just amniotic fluid. Okay. So anyway, I went through all that. And then when they did the C-section, I was put out. Later on, I found out that I had pushed really well, but I had kind of wedged him into my pelvis. He just wasn't coming down. I couldn't figure out why he wasn't descending. Well, I had later found out from someone that women who tend to have large frames, their pelvises can be shaped more like a man's. That's why you see like these little ones, these little women just like spitting out 10-pounders.
Like
no
my mom.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
But they have great pelvises and everything was made for that.
It's the pelvic inlet. It's like, or the outlet. I mean, that is like small or large. And yeah, there's like many different shapes of the pelvis.
And mine, I guess, was small. I'm like, I have nothing small on me. Yes. Of course, it would have to be that. So anyway.
Well, and what's interesting to me too, I never made this connection until, I did a VBAC attempt with Sonia. It didn't work. And so I did have a scheduled, sort of scheduled C-section, like after we decided. But I have it's called Bartolotti syndrome. So my L5 has a larger, like, lateral transverse process. So I actually have an extra joint in my, like, L5S1 pelvis. So I wonder, women with Bartolotti syndrome, like, sort of like how you found out that maybe like a woman who's 6 foot might have a pelvic shape more like a man, and women or whoever with Bartolotti syndrome, maybe their pelvis doesn't open up because there's an extra joint there that doesn't allow movement.
Which we can't. I mean, that's not a failure on either part, but isn't it funny how, I mean, right from the beginning, you feel like a failure. And probably even before that. I felt like a failure because I couldn't get pregnant. But definitely, you feel that from the moment you have a child. Like you're not enough. There's this failure aspect. And then it just kind of continues. You have to go back to work, or you miss a concert because of work, or whatever. Or you don't have the money to pay for X, Y, or Z. And all the other kids are having these opportunities and you don't. We had been there at one point too. And so, yeah, that failure, I don't know if it ever goes away.
Do you think this is something that is more poignant for us in the, so we're both in the late 40, early 50 range. You're younger. Yeah. But like our parents probably didn't have this feeling, right? At least that wasn't the way that I feel like I was parented. Like, I feel like I was parented like in fact, my dad, we did a podcast and he said, what was his parenting advice? To test your children. Like I think he felt like he was a military sergeant who had a troop of children that he needed to prepare for the real world. And the harder he could be on us, the better we would survive, the better outcomes we would have. No, I mean, he was right. I mean, because we are pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I guess it's scrappy.
I mean, in an alley, I'm going to win. No. Even though I'm only 5'3". No, but I think, like, is it a cultural shift, right? Like, is there a cultural shift? My parents, we never went to summer camp. My dad said we were lucky to have a bike that he got at a garage sale that we repainted. I didn't have a Cabbage Patch doll. I didn't have Guess jeans. We went to the Salvation Army. And now flipping it all the way. No, I love thrifting. I love saving money. I love a sale. I go straight to the clearance racks. Like, that's sort of a part of like what I actually enjoy doing. Maybe because I was raised that way. But I don't think my mom had this guilt. I don't think my dad had this guilt.
Yeah.
Or did they, and they didn't talk about it?
Yeah. Did they really talk about their feelings? I know my mom and dad did not talk about their feelings. They must have been in touch with them. But like,
or were they?
Or were they? Right. I don't know.
Or did they have such cultural pressure to do a certain thing or be a certain way? Or
yeah, I don't feel, at least my mom and dad, I don't feel like they had this drive to, we see a systematic problem, so we're going to change it. Definitely that was not the case. It was, we're Catholic. I was brought up in a Catholic home, so it was always just be thankful, just walk in, stay in the herd, don't be a lost sheep, and fulfill your obligation. Like, if you do that, then you're good to go. Well, nowadays it feels much more complicated. It's not just, if I do this and this, we'll be okay. I don't know. Maybe they did and they just didn't want to talk about it. They probably figured nothing would change. And who knows? I also grew up in whose family isn't dysfunctional, but we were kind of told, well, don't talk about that. Don't tell people what's going on in your family. So I don't know if they would have done anything. Mom and dad just didn't seem like they just didn't complain a lot. So definitely, I'm not that way. I complain.
But I'm not. Well, I think we all do. And I think that's very, very different. But yeah, it is much different.
It's hard to supervise, manage, coach. Not because there's anything wrong with this newer generation. It's just that it's so different from how my brain works.
Yeah.
But I kind of understand it at the same time. It's like, why are we pushing people this hard?
Yeah.
Like, why are we expecting that because your salary, you should work 50 hours a week, every week, and be okay with it, and just be thankful you have a job? Like, why are we doing that?
Well, I think it's because we are doing it, right? Like, we as these, like, late 40, early 50s folks, we are working 50, 60 hours. You have been on call a million nights and a million days. It does feel a little unfair. I want to work 30 hours and be home with my kids because that hasn't been our reality.
To kind of bring it back, maybe that's why, not because my mom would have been jealous or angry, but, maybe that's why my mom was like, you know what, you can do this. You don't need me there. Like, I did it. If I did it, you can do it. And we're kind of doing the same thing. Yeah. Like,
It's our turn to sit by the pond and dip our feet in it.
yeah. But I don't think that's how it's going to be.
No.
I think we're going to be on the hamster wheel, maybe because we feel like we have to keep running on that wheel, or either something's going to happen, or maybe because we're kind of programmed to feel like we're earning our keep.
That's where our worth is, right?
Yeah, like that's who you are.
Yeah.
You're enough if you keep plugging along. And so maybe this other generation has it figured out. I'm sure they're going to bring their own problems and own insecurities, just like we have to the world. But maybe we're just, gosh, as I'm talking, I'm thinking, maybe I'm not as content as I thought I was. Because I do feel like that many times of, well, like, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I did this. And I've even said it, like, all right, I was on call during the holiday break. So
Yeah.
maybe I'm just an asshole. I don't know.
You're definitely not. You're definitely not. And Kat, as we close it up today, I just want to say, you are an amazing mother. You are an amazing mother to a community of people. You are a mother and a nurturer in every aspect of your job, creating that community for your students and for the folks who work for you. If you could see this in person, Kat makes these gorgeous cards, and every occasion is literally celebrated. Kat makes cards for everybody who's in the show with Jonah or everybody who does XYZ. You really make a beautiful impact on this world. I hope you leave this moment, this podcast, knowing how worthy of praise you are. Thanks for being on the podcast, Kat. Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, like, or subscribe? You can find me on social media at wautierwellness.com, Dr. Stephanie Wautier on Instagram, or Wautier Wellness Chiropractic and Massage on Facebook. And I'm so curious where your next conversation will take you.